Good morning. Is it still morning wherever you are?
It is. It's 11:30 a.m. Yeah,
All right, East Coast, I presume then.
that's right.
All right. I'm in
Can
Los
you hear, can
Angeles
you hear
right
me
now.
okay and everything?
I can, yeah. You're a
Cool,
pro. You,
cool.
you got your mic there. You got your pro
hmm
audio.
That's right.
Yes. Well, thanks for joining us. It's a little earlier over here in Los Angeles, but I'm up and I'm awake. I got my caffeine. We're good to go.
Cool, man. Sounds good.
So, how'd you get into music? Could you tell us a little bit about, when you were a kid and maybe when you found out that, music was kind of the thing or when you fell in love with it?
Yeah, for sure. I owe so much of it to my oldest brother. He's 4 years older than me. Um, and I forget exactly how old I was, but I want to say I was probably around 7 years old when he kind of, before that point, my parents would listen to, whatever was on, the radio. It was pretty like easy listening kind of stuff, like radio stuff, and that's
Hmm.
all the music I really knew. And this I was born in 1986,
Hmm.
and my older brother showed me Smashing Pumpkins, the song "Today" by Smashing Pumpkins,
Nice. Hmm.
when I was, again, probably about 7 or 8 years old or so. And I feel like that moment, like, really kind of changed my life. And I was just immediately like, show me more, and so he kind of got me into a lot of these, it was a lot of like 90s rock bands, Smashing Pumpkins, Oasis, Bush, Nirvana, all that stuff. And just got like super into it. And then he, maybe like a year or two after that, got a guitar and started playing guitar and started playing in a band with some friends when he was in middle school. And I just thought that was super cool and wanted to do that too. And so when I was 10, I asked for an acoustic guitar for Christmas, and got that. And then that's pretty much been what I wanted to do ever since then. Um,
Nice.
yeah, sorry,
So
go
you
ahead.
said 10 was when you got your first acoustic?
That's right. Yeah, it was I guess that would have been 96.
So
And
that's around like fifth grade. And your brother was he in high school? You were kind of looking up to him, or was it late middle school? You said like 4 years older or something?
right, yeah, I guess he would have been yeah, I guess he would have been ninth grade then. Yeah, whenever I was in fifth. Yeah. And yeah, I just thought it was such a cool thing. And like those are the first, of any kind of like concerts or shows that I went to, was going to see him, his band play like local gigs and whatnot. Those are the first shows I went to. And I just, now he's a doctor, and lives a very, completely different
Sure.
life, but I feel like I owe so much of, kind of getting my foot in the door to just wanting to be like him and do what he was doing.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a familiar story. You have someone you look up to. They pick up a guitar or show you an album, and you being the younger, more impressionable person looking up to this person, and you take it to a whole other level, like because like you said, he's a doctor now, and here you are, a rock star.
Right.
So it's sometimes that people don't know the impressions they leave, especially on those who look up to them.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the truth.
So you start playing acoustic, and then when do you start kind of finding like-minded friends? Is it pretty immediately after that? Do some of your other friends pick up guitars and you guys start jamming soon after that, or when did that start happening?
Yeah, so that was kind of like what I wanted immediately, but the way it worked out, it took I guess a couple years before that started to happen. And until then, so I have another older brother, the middle. I'm the youngest, and then my middle brother got a bass guitar for Christmas that same year that I got the acoustic. And I have a cousin who's the same age as me, and we were always really, my brothers and him were all really, really close, and he is pretty much like a brother to me. And he got an acoustic guitar at the same time. And so my middle brother, Mark, and my cousin Travis and I started kind of, that was the first of any kind of, if you could call it, like a band or a group or whatever. We would just learn how to play these songs acoustically. And we started writing our own songs. And we would like, pick a new band name like every week and act like we were in a band. And what's, the first kind of experience of anything, any sort of performance, I guess, is we used to have these get-togethers at my grandparents' house, where the uncles and aunts and cousins and everybody would be there. And we would all, we'd always spend this time playing and practicing and all this. And we started setting up. They had in their downstairs kind of like entertainment room, they had a pool table, and we would set up chairs on the pool table and play. We'd bring in everybody. We'd have our cousins act like they were like the younger ones. They would like take people's tickets at the door, and we'd be waiting
That's awesome.
in the bathroom like it was backstage, and we'd turn
That's
off the
awesome.
lights and have like flashlights, and so we'd go up and play for our family on and so they were always supporting. I'm sure it was like awful, these silly like 10-year-old kids, like, but they were all
Sounds
supportive,
awesome.
and it was cool. And so that was kind of like, for those, I feel like for those, from about, when I was 10 till I was 12, that was basically what was going on, musically. And then when I started sixth grade, that was kind of like, I was really anxious to find other people that wanted to play music. And eventually I met this kid named Ben, who we became friends, and he played drums. And that was like exactly, it's like, oh yes, and I finally have a friend who plays music. And so I'd go over to his house and bring my guitar and my amp, and we would just like, jam. And he's actually the one who introduced me to Brooks, who's the guitar player in Mayday Parade.
Uh-huh.
Um, this would have been now. So I guess, I guess I was 11 when I started playing with Ben in sixth grade. And then when I was 12 in seventh grade, Ben tells me, there's this guy named Brooks who plays guitar, and he should, come jam with us. And so we set it up where Brooks was going to come back to my house with Ben one day after school. And that was the day that I met Brooks. I'd never even met him before. But after school, we all go to the car pickup, parent pickup area, and I
Uh-huh.
meet him for the first time, and he's got his guitar, and he pulls it out while we're waiting, and it starts playing Stairway to Heaven. And I was like, yes, okay, like this guy, he can actually play,
Right.
um, and so yeah, the day that I met Brooks, he came to my house and we jammed, and it was like pretty much, from that point on, it became like, it got more and more serious as it went, where, eventually we were in high school, and we cared about the music we were doing and the bands we were playing in way more than any kind of like school stuff or anything. And but like I feel like kind of like right from the start, even whenever we were in seventh grade, like, every weekend I would either go to his house and spend the weekend out there, or he'd come to my house and spend the weekend, and we would just band practice all weekend long and then go back to school. We started, I've said many times, if I hadn't met Brooks, then I don't think I would be where I am today, because he is such like, yeah, it's hard to even describe, but like I don't think I ever would have figured it out. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I would have been like, there were so many people that I knew that like wanted to play music and wanted to be like in a band, but we're just like I would have, I don't know how to figure this stuff out. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
You just expect that like something's gonna happen at some point.
Right.
But Brooks was like, he was always like very proactive. Like, right, and we had like a couple band practices, and he's like, all right, so let's like see how we can play some shows, and let's like start calling people, and let's start, and it was like, oh, okay, I guess that, okay, and he just like just figured it all out, and we eventually start playing, our friends' birthday parties, and
Uh-huh.
getting paid like $100 to play birthday parties, and we'd save up all this money in our band fund, and eventually we could buy, like a $600 little like digital 4-track recording onto these discs, and
Uh-huh.
so we started recording our own demos, and then getting like t-shirts pressed and like all this stuff that like I never would have, had the drive to like figure out how to do it. But Brooks was always like, the management kind of person from the very
Right.
beginning.
Right.
And so yeah, it was pretty wild, and that was like, and then it started to become like I was a complete loser in middle school. I
Uh-huh.
was I was like, especially sixth grade was very hard for me, and I got made fun of a lot, and I would, wore like short shorts to school and got like picked on, and like I was like the furthest thing from cool you could imagine. And
Uh-huh.
then like by the time we were in eighth grade, and like, now we're like in a band that plays like these school events and like these
Right.
birthday parties and stuff, and people kind of thought like, this is kind of cool,
Yeah.
and so it
Suddenly
really
they're
kind
like,
of
oh,
like,
maybe short shorts are cool.
right, right,
Right.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I mean, it was it did so much for me. And yeah, and I feel like even from just, like a pretty young age, we knew that like this was our, our dream and what we wanted to do. And we hadn't really figured it all out yet. And we didn't know like right away that, we weren't going to go to college and we were going to go tour and all this, but just like, it was just taking, kind of steps along the way, just like learning how to be a band. And sorry if I'm skipping too much ground here and
No,
going.
no, I love it. You're taking us through it. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I mean, going back a little bit, I love how even when you were a kid, that's what you were doing when you were going to your family parties. It's,
Mhm.
I know when I wish that's what I was doing, but I was like bringing my video games over to like my aunt or uncle's house, and me and my cousins would all play. And eventually later we did, we got guitars and stuff, and we would do that a little bit. But I love that you guys were, it's, some kids are playing like Nerf guns, but you're playing like Rockstar pretty much. You had your backstage area. It was almost like you were creating. It was like a play almost. And you had your ticket person and everything. But I did want to, since you mentioned, since I can ask a little questions here. I was wondering, what were you playing at that time? Because I know you said, your older brother showed you Smashing Pumpkins. So when you were getting together, in middle school and then getting into high school, did you already kind of start like loving punk rock? Was that the thing, or or was it still kind of more alt rock? What were you doing at that point?
Right, yeah. So I guess middle school, it was a lot of '90s rock for
Hmm.
sure. When we first started, we played a lot of Bush covers,
Hmm.
some Nirvana covers, some Metallica. We were like writing our own songs. So in middle school, the first like I guess the first real band other than the family stuff that I said the name changed every week and whatever. I don't know if you can really call that, but whenever Brooks and I met, we started a band called Soul Hysteria.
Cool.
um, and that was our like from our for about 3 years there, I guess, from like seventh through ninth grade.
Uh-huh.
Soul Hysteria was our band, and we did a lot of those alternative rock kind of covers, and then we also wrote a lot of our own songs, and we wanted to be like dark and kind of like I don't even know what band is a good example, but I was like really into Metallica,
Uh-huh.
and just it was a lot of what today would maybe be called butt rock, but we
Right,
were
right.
very
Yeah.
very into a lot of that. And then so in ninth grade, well, it's hard to a lot of it's yeah, around eighth or ninth grade is when we started kind of getting tapped into like the scene, like the underground kind of like like hardcore bands, like emo bands, like things like
Hmm.
that.
Right.
It's probably hardcore bands first. There's a local band in Tallahassee called I Have Dreams, that my brother went to high school with. It was a bunch of high school kids, and my brother went to school with him. And so he comes home one day and shows me this CD of these guys he's friends with that are in a band. And it was the first hardcore music I had ever heard, and
Hmm.
they just had this like 5-song EP. It was all they ever did. It's still like one of my favorite, pieces of music that exists. It's very kind of chaotic, and like there's a long story with it, and it's extremely like emotional, and like they were in a band, and their guitar player had died in a car accident, and so they kind of took that same band, and the kid who died's best friend joined to play guitar, and now they were called I Have Dreams, and it was extremely
Wow.
emotional music, and it was kind of like
Sure.
their way of like dealing with the pain they were going through and everything. Actually, the tattoo I have here is the artwork from the EP they did.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, that was the first hardcore music I got into, and so then Brooks and I wanted to start a hardcore band, and so while we were
What's
still
that?
doing
What was that hardcore band called? We'll check them out.
yeah, oh yeah, the one I Have Dreams, this one here,
I
or the
have
one that
dreams.
Brooks
Right.
met.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I Have Dreams. So I mean, it's so good, and I got to keep in mind this was like probably like 1998 or something like that. It was a
Sure.
long time ago, and
Plus, you have
but
that nostalgia connected to it too, so it's it'll forever be
right.
elevated in your mind. But yeah.
Right, for sure. There's a lot of emotional attachment to it. Yeah. But we got, yeah. So then it was kind of like we started to shift into, we wanted to be in a hardcore band. And so we started a hardcore band with my cousin who I mentioned earlier, Travis, who I was playing guitar with. he was the screamer, and I played guitar, and Brooks played bass, and Brooks's younger brother Colson played drums. And we started a band called And Then the Stars Fell, and that was our hardcore band. And we were, we were terrible. But this was
all of these are
ninth
names
grade.
that sound like they should be names, if so
Right,
I
right.
feel like you guys probably have a good catalog of names you guys could sell to up and coming bands. You could
Right, for sure.
create your own band name generator.
Yeah. And it's what's fun. I'm talking about all this. Like I realized, we recorded a lot of demos and things with Soul Stereo and these old bands, and I don't like have any of that now. And I really should try and track some of that down, because it
Totally,
would be cool to go back and listen to like the very I was 12 years old whenever we did our first like demo with Soul Hysteria, and I know it sounds horrible, but it's good to have that stuff, just to be able to listen
yeah.
back to.
I bet some of that stuff you're like, oh, we'll come back and improve this later or whatever, and then and you just forget about it.
Yeah,
And yeah,
right, yeah, for sure. And I think there's probably some decent little moments in some of those songs and whatnot. And there's things that I
sure,
think even like carried through. Like I think there's some little bits of some of those songs that wound up even like in Mayday Parade songs, or way down the line. But so yeah, that was ninth grade. Now we were like, and then it was like there was like now there were the kids that we looked up to that were older than us. We were in ninth grade, and there were these other like junior and senior kids that played in other hardcore bands, and did the whole wearing like girl jeans and like super like like the whole like the scene or whatever. And this was
sure,
in like 2000, so this was kind of like the beginning of that.
right,
So that was kind of like our identity through high school. Was we kind of shifted into away from this kind of radio rock, more like baggy jean like kind of thing, to
right,
now we were like scene kids, and we were like straight
sure,
edge and all that stuff. And then got super into emo music. Like Jimmy Eat World probably at first, and then Newfound Glory and Saves the Day and Juliana Theory and
right,
Taking
right,
Back Sunday and all that
yeah,
stuff. And so that was the next after we did a couple of years of the hardcore thing. And then one day, a friend, well, I guess I was when I was a junior in high school, a buddy of mine who I'd known for a while and had played in some other bands. There was always a high school battle of the bands at Lincoln. They had a battle of the bands once a year,
right,
and bands we were in always played. And a friend of mine goes, Derek, let's start a band like just for battle of the bands. Like we'll just it was probably like 2 months away, and I was like, okay, yeah, let's so we got some buds together. This was the only band I'd played in at this point that Brooks wasn't in. And so we got together, and now I'm like really into emo music, and so wrote kind of like the first like emo song, I guess.
Okay,
And it was pretty cool, and I felt like this was like kind of a neat thing. And we ended up being at a party or something, and kind of like an impromptu, a couple of us were there, and we're like, let's play a couple of these songs we wrote. And I just sat on the piano, and two of the guys with acoustic guitars, and we played a couple songs. And then there were people I didn't know at the party that were asking for my autograph, and that was the first time that
nice,
ever happened. And I was like, what? Like, that's crazy. And so I talked to Brooks the next day, and I was like, dude, like we played some of these songs at a party, and people were like, I was like, Brooks, you got to come be in this band. Cause like, this was almost like, this was like kind of like the joke band. It was kind of like, not, it was like the let's just start a band for Battle of the Bands.
right,
And then
right,
it was like, actually, like, wait, so Brooks didn't even play piano or keyboard at all. But I was like, all the other positions are filled. You got to come just play keyboard, I guess, and so he was like, all right. So, so he came, and there was like a few months where he was the keyboardist, and then we'd eventually, I think we kicked out one of the guitar players, and Brooks came in and filled in a guitar. And then that band kind of became like it was called Defining Moment. And that kind of became our serious, we kind of quit our other bands and focused on that. And the next year, our senior year, we won the high school battle of the bands, and started to kind of like, pick up a little bit of, we'd always been playing these local shows with all these bands and never really built up much of like a following or anything. But with Defining Moment, it started to we started to have some fans or some people that would kind of start building this fan base.
Yeah.
And then we decided that we, didn't want to go to college and wanted to tour. We got added on a lot of these shows that would come through. There'd be bands, like Copeland or Anberlin, or a lot of these bands would come through and play Tallahassee, and we'd get booked, added onto the show. And we would always try and talk to these bands about like, how do you get started? How do you do this? And we got a lot of like advice and a lot of information. And a lot of people told us that like, you got to, just get out there and tour. Like you can't like wait for, a label to find you and just make it happen. You have to just kind of prove that you're willing to do it. And so that was our plan for, our senior year was like, all right, we're not going to go to college. We're going to start touring. And Brooks booked us a tour. I mean, he worked really hard, just emailing promoters and calling promoters. And, there was a website called Book Your Own Fucking Life that he would go to and had all this like, resources and all that. And so he booked us a tour that left, I guess, about, a week or two after we graduated high school, that went up the East Coast to Maine and back down to Florida. And so that was kind of, that was like, we knew, we're out of high school, we're going to hit this, we're going to just try and tour and make it happen. And we toured in that band for about, a year and a half, I guess, before we started Mayday Parade, then in 2005, and then kind of kept going from there.
Yeah, that's amazing. I wonder if that Battle of the Bands band, if it kind of allowed you to just kind of, there were no expectations for it except for that one moment. So if you were able to maybe just write a little bit easier and just kind of let go of some of your expectations of whatever it may have been, some of your harder rock stuff that you were doing before, if you could be like, oh, I could drop that entirely and just write for whatever this band is. And if that kind of open, it's kind of like the Beatles, Sergeant Pepper, we're going to drop the Beatles and we'll just be a different band for this album. And then it just opens up the world, I wonder, do you feel like that might've been part of it?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good point, and it was just, there were a lot of different things where it was like the right time, it was like the right, I'd kind of like turned a page in what I was listening to and what I was being influenced by at the same time as like, hey, let's start this new kind of thing. And I was like, well, I'll try, and it just kind of just clicked, but it was always, and I'm not to say anything bad about any of the people that I played music with, but with all of these bands, it was always like Brooks and I were on the same page of like feeling like, we both, this is what we really, really wanted to do, like more than anything else in the world, and it was always trying to like find the other people that were on that same page. And so even with that band, Defining Moment, like it, even though things, kind of were great there, but it was always like, but these aren't really all the right people necessarily. And you know what I mean? And it was always trying to like cycle through members to find, and that happened for the first time whenever we finally started Mayday Parade. Was like, we had our first practice of like, let's try this thing out. And I remember that being like such a crazy moment, because it was like finally after like years of wanting this and trying to make this happen, now it's like we feel like we have the right people. Everyone's incredibly talented, and great, positive people who just like really, this is their dream. And it was like, because even like, touring and Defining Moment, it was still like, it was a band that we started in with just high school friends, and so like it wasn't like it, and I, and they were my best friends, and it was tough to leave that band, but it's still, there was that moment with Mayday Parade whenever it's like finally clicked,
Yeah, and I think it was great that you guys got advice from these bigger acts that were coming through, and I think it was great advice that they said you just got to do it and not wait for a label or management or anything like that. So you guys got on bookyourownfuckinglife.com. Is that what it was called? I still
Right,
remember that website, and I mean, so that's awesome. So you guys started booking your own tours. So when did they finally start noticing like, hey, these guys are serious? And when did you start getting, better shows? When do when was it soon after that you were able to get on Warped Tour, or tell us a little bit about how you made that transition from, a lot of hardcore DIY to, more, being supported by some other elements.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's a lot to it, and sorry if I kind of go on too long with this, but so I feel
No,
like it was
no.
a very
Perfect.
gradual. We kind of so with defining moments. Whenever we did these short tours, and they'd be a couple weeks at a time or whatever. We would always go. We'd get to whatever city. We'd kind of get to the venue, load in, or do whatever. Then we'd have a couple hours to kill. We'd always go to a nearby mall, wherever
Hmm.
the nearest mall was, and we
Right.
walk around with like a Discman CD player and headphones,
Uh-huh.
and we'd go to like Hot Topic or like wherever, and just try and kind of like be like, hey guys, like we're in a band playing tonight, and you show them the music, and
Yeah.
we'd be selling. We had an EP, a 6-song EP that we had paid to just get pressed ourselves, and we had however many, a couple thousand copies of it we had pressed. Um, and we go around, try and sell a couple of those, and try and get people to come to the show. We'd have flyers for the show, and so that was basically what we did at every city we went to. We'd have those couple hours. We'd go to a mall, get some food, hang out, try and show some people our songs, maybe sell 1 or 2 CDs, the EPs, and try and get some folks to come to the show. Then one day, we played in Jacksonville, Florida, at a place called Jackrabbits.
Uh-huh.
And this was one of those like, like just like crazy luck kind of thing, whatever. But and one of those things where you always look back and say like, it's kind of like the cliche thing, but like you never know who's watching. You gotta like make
Uh-huh.
every show count, kind of
Sure.
thing. But
Yeah.
we played this show. I don't remember much about the show, but afterwards, this dude comes up to us and he goes, "Yo, he's like, I liked you guys' band." He goes, "I'm the promoter of Taste of Chaos for Jacksonville tomorrow." So Taste of Chaos was a tour. This was the first year they did it. It was Kevin Lyman who does Warped Tour. It was like a
Nice.
newer thing he was doing.
Hmm.
It was The Used and My Chemical Romance. I forget who else was on it that first year, but it was kind of like a heavier sort of tour. We loved all the bands on it. And he
Sure.
goes, "Okay, anyway, yeah, I'm the promoter for Taste of Chaos. That show's here tomorrow. Do you guys want to come? I'll get you tickets to the show." And we were like, "Oh yes." And we had the next day off or whatever it was. And so we were stoked to go see Taste of Chaos.
Yeah.
And so the next day we go, and there's thousands and thousands of people there, just like in line, hanging out, whatever. And we go, well, okay, we got our CD. Like we're used to walking around and showing people. Let's just walk around out here and show
Yeah.
people the band.
Smart. Yeah.
And so we walked around, and we ended up selling 100 CDs just that one
Wow.
day. And afterwards, we had like a meeting in the van. We were like, wait a second. We were like, we spend a month, out touring and don't sell 100 CDs. We're probably
Uh-huh.
selling like 1 or 2 a day or whatever. And
Uh-huh.
we were like, this is crazy. We just sold 100 CDs in one day. And so
Yeah.
then we start going, well, what if we just followed a tour like this and sold CDs? We could probably do pretty well. Uh,
Hmm.
and so and so that was the plan. And so then from that moment on, we kind of planned for 2005 Warped Tour. We were going to follow it and just sell CDs. We weren't going to play at all. We were going to just have our van, our trailer full. We had 10,000 CDs pressed,
Right.
and our trailer was just full of CDs. And we followed the entire Warped Tour and walked around all day with backpacks full of CDs. And we all had our own, Discman CD players or whatever. And we walked around and we'd sell, anywhere from 100 to a couple hundred CDs a day. I think we sold, about 9 or 10,000 CDs throughout the summer.
Amazing.
Um,
Genius.
yeah, and it was, yeah, I mean, it was like one of those things where like if we hadn't been going to mall, like it was just kind of like it was like just steps that led us eventually to this makes more sense, as far as like promoting our band and getting like the word out there. We could play these small shows forever and not really make nearly as much headway as far as like getting our name out there
Right.
as following and selling these CDs. And so that's what we did. It was very successful. We felt like, and that was 2005 Warped Tour. And then it wasn't long after that we started to, have kind of our some doubts about that band and whether, again, if it was the right people and all that. And there was another band called The Last Try that Jake and Alex and Jason were in, the other three guys that came to, and so we started kind of saying, like, what if we took, these guys from Defining Moment and these guys from The Last Try, like, wouldn't that be so cool? And and at first we almost kind of like were joking about it. We like joked about how that would be the super band. We're like, let's make the super band, and then eventually started actually talking about it seriously, and did that first band practice of Mayday Parade to try it out, and we loved it and went forward. And so once we had established Mayday Parade, that was like day one. It was like, okay, we have to write 6 songs, go record them, get them pressed, get 10,000 copies of them pressed, and go follow Warped Tour 2006 and do the same thing that Defining Moment just did.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like a hit the ground running for Mayday Parade. It was like taking all of this stuff that we had learned from playing in all these other bands and applying that like on day one to Mayday Parade. And so that's what we did. We got 10,000 copies, or maybe a little, because I think we sold 11,000 copies in 2005 Warped Tour with Mayday Parade. And during Warped Tour, there kind of started to be, some buzz generated around the band, and MySpace was the big social media platform, and music, website back then. Started getting heavier and heavier traffic on MySpace, and then we were approached by a couple different labels while we were on Warped Tour, still selling CDs, and Fearless was one of those labels. And while we were out in California selling CDs, they had us come do a showcase for them. We didn't even have any equipment. We didn't have our gear because we just had CDs, so we had to borrow. I forget what band it was. There was a band on Fearless that let us use their gear. It's horrible that I can't think of who it is now, but they were gracious enough to let us borrow all their stuff so we could play a showcase for these guys. And met Fearless at their office. They seemed really into it. Out of all the labels we were talking to, they seemed just the most genuine, and that they really wanted the band. And so we signed with them, and they officially re-released the EP that we had recorded, Tales Told by Dead Friends.
Right.
And then we got to work writing A Lesson in Romantics soon after that. We got like a real booking agent for the first time, so it wasn't Brooks booking our tours. And then the first tour we did, what's funny is that Mayday Parade, we followed Warped Tour in 2006 selling CDs before we had ever toured as a band. We did, so our first tour wasn't even playing music, it was just selling CDs. And then
that's really it's really insightful though. You guys were touring, but you weren't playing. You were touring. It was a marketing tour for your band.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, and it's so funny because it sounds crazy. And like, even like explaining it to people, they were like, what? Like, you guys are a band out here, but you don't even have your gear? Like, what do you do? Like, it was such a weird concept at the time.
The irony is, I bet you sold more CDs than a lot of the bands who were actually playing, because you were just walking around hustling. So you may have had more of an impact, obviously you did, than a lot of the bands that were probably playing on that tour.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's really like, a way of sort of making the most of that opportunity of having, tens of thousands of people there that like, some kind of, music in this world,
Right.
And so it's such a huge opportunity. And it was, both years following Warped Tour were two of the best summers of my life as far as just some of the memories and how much fun it was. It was also incredibly exhausting and just so much work, and like, sleeping hardly at all, like in a van every night, driving to the next city, just roasting all day long, not taking showers, it was so, gross, and it was a lot of work, but it's just kind of what you got to do. And so then we were signed. We did our first official tour, playing music with Mayday Parade in the fall of 2006 with Wheatus, and Melee, and a band called Fall of Transition. And it was a really small tour of maybe about 20 or 30 people, some days less than that. But it was cool to just be on you know, like a real actual tour, not just being like added on local shows. It was like, you know, bands touring together. It was our first experience doing that. And then it just kind of slowly built from there. We went and recorded A Lesson in Romantics. And then right after we recorded A Lesson in Romantics, we were lucky enough to get put on the Plain White Tees tour.
Nice.
This was early 2007. That was the first, like, you know, kind of big tour we had ever done. I remember the first show of that tour was in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and there was like 800 people there, and that was the largest show we'd ever played, you know, at that point. And so being like super nervous, and I actually fell and got a concussion and fractured my eye socket like 10 minutes before we went on stage. It was in February, and so it was in Wisconsin, and you know, it's crazy cold. And you know, we're from Florida, we're not used to it. And I walk into the van, there was all this ice on the pavement, and I wasn't used to it, and slipped and fell and just nailed my head. So it was a pretty gnarly start to the tour. But anyway, then we, you know, did that tour. Jason, the sixth member of the band, left. He quit the band and went home in the middle of that tour, and we had to play a show the next day without him, which was incredibly difficult to pull off without having any time to rehearse. But then we had like a month off after that tour, and then 2007 was probably our busiest touring year ever. We went out for 7 months straight, where it was straight from one tour to the next. We had 1 day off at home in Tallahassee, and those 7 months. And that was such a crazy time, because it started from about 2 months before A Lesson in Romantics came out. Then it came out, and then we had 5 months more, and just seeing things grow in that 7 months of like the beginning of it. We're doing a tour, playing for hardly anybody. By the end of that 7 months, there's a decent number of people coming to these shows, singing along, and we did a lot of international stuff. You know, it was like a U.S. tour, into Warped Tour, into going to Japan and Australia for the first time, back to the U.S., over to the U.K. for the first time, back to the U.S., and like just it was nonstop. We've never done anything else quite as just all at once, 7 months, a chunk at a time like that before. But it was wild, and that was when we really started to see things kind of start to pick up and take off.
Right. So after that kind of extensive legitimate touring, not right away, but you started seeing the needle kind of move at the later parts of that. That's awesome. And there's so many bands that came out of that scene, but I think the ingenuity that you talked about a little bit must be part of the reason why you guys have been so successful, because talking about taking us from 15 people at a show to now selling over 1 million albums, and I think your last album had been streamed over 62 million times or something like that.
I don't even know, but yeah.
I mean, just crazy numbers. Do you feel like there were any once you started seeing the needle move a little bit more, do you feel like you were starting to put your the growth in other people's hands at that point? The snowball was rolling enough for you to kind of let go a little bit of that and focus more on the music and other things, or do you feel that you've had to continuously find those smart ways to do things like you were even in those early days?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think that there was a lot that we learned, especially kind of in those first couple years of things starting to kind of take off. And yeah, on the one hand, it was amazing to feel like you kind of start building this team. Like at first it's just the band and that's it, and then you've got a manager, and now you've got a booking agent, and now you've got a label, and now you've got touring crew with you to help handle all that, and that becomes easier. And there's a lot of things that you start to go like, well, thank goodness we're not like booking our own tours anymore, and like we don't have to worry and work quite as hard, but I also feel like there's something that you kind of, you know, maybe you do start to get too comfortable, and you don't want to like lose any of that, some of that drive, you know.
Sure.
And I, you know, we did our so after, so Less Than Romantics was, you know, pretty successful first album, and then we go in to record our second album, and we got upstreamed from Fearless to Atlantic, and so
Nice.
now that's a completely different world, you know,
Hmm.
of being on a, you know, Fearless is an independent indie label, and then Atlantic's a major label that, you know, it's this huge machine, you know, of tons of people and lots of money being thrown around, and
Right.
so that was, you know, I've said this a lot, but like our second album, Anywhere But Here, was such a, you know, chaotic time for the band, and we really, I feel like so much had happened so fast, and you know, just 2 years earlier we were just starting out and we were 19-year-old kids, and now we're on this major label who's putting in like lots of money, like serious money into this project, and they want, you know, a pretty big say in all the things that are going on, and they want you to go do, you know, co-writing with these people and work with this big name producer and do all, you know,
Right.
and we and we didn't know, you know, like where we stood as a band, and as, you know, we had lost one of our members, Jason, who was a pretty, you know, he was a he and I wrote, you know, a lot of songs together, so we was losing a pretty big writer, and just, you know, kind of a lot that had happened in a short amount of time. And so we kind of just like went with this whole like, okay, it's Atlantic Records, and like, you know, they're gonna make us big, and we got to just like do what they want us to do. And there were a lot of things that like we kind of felt weird about, and that like we didn't really want to do, but we also didn't want to rock the boat too much.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so we just kind of like allowed these things to happen, and we kind of like lost a lot of control of the band. And you know, for a while that album was my least favorite record of ours, and
Mm.
I've come to view it, you know, more favorably lately as time has passed. But it was just such a like, we didn't have any control, and there were songs that we loved that Atlantic didn't love, so they were like, no, we're not going to do those songs, and we're like, okay. And then they wanted us to do all these co-writing, and we kind of hated the experience of it. And when we were in the studio recording that album, they literally, it was in New Jersey, and it was about, you know, 45 minutes from New York City where the Atlantic headquarters in, and they'd have a couple dudes come to the studio once a week, and they'd have a meeting, and they wouldn't let us be a part of it. They would go into the
Wow.
they'd go into the control room and listen
Uh-huh.
to everything we had recorded so far. And the
Uh-huh.
first time they did it, we thought they were joking. We're like, yeah, let's do it. We're stoked. And they were like, no, it's just gonna be us. Like, you guys need to. And we were like, oh, that's funny. And they were like, no,
Ye-
we're serious. So they're like,
Wow.
okay.
Yeah.
And so that was just like, we're like, this is so lame. Like, we can't even be involved in the meeting about the album that we're making, you know.
Right.
And so we just kind of like, you know, then we did that album, and then with the day, it was like I'd been like shoving these things down for so long and just like pretending like this is fine, you know. and
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and then I and then I realized we played a show in Salt Lake City. The day that album came out, and I realized like I'm not excited about this album, like,
Mm-hmm.
or not
Mm-hmm.
not nearly as excited as I was the previous one, you
Sure.
know. And I was like, you know, we can't, like, what did we just do? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why did we do that? And we all kind of realized like, okay, that was dumb. We have to go back to, like, you know, we're the ones who have to like go out and play these songs. Like,
Yeah.
this is our project that we started. Like, we need to be stoked about this, you know, first and foremost,
Sure.
before like making a label happy. And
Uh-huh.
so we kind of like did a big, you know, shift and turned back around to like, okay, we're just gonna go back to making the music that we want to make. We asked Atlantic to like let us go, like, can you guys like let us go back to just like being on Fearless again? And
Yeah.
um and they did. They were cool with it. They were like, all right, you know. And they didn't have, like, you know, they had every right. So we were in a, you know, contract with them. And so that is one thing that I thought was cool of them, that they allowed us to. And that's an experience that kills so many bands. Like, there's so many bands that make that, you know, this is the major label, you know, album that's like kind of different from what they've done before, and you know, it can kind of wipe out a band's momentum, and a lot of bands don't recover from that. And
Yeah.
so I've always been super grateful that we were able to go through that process and kind of learn a lot about like what we don't want as a band, and you know, who we are as a band, and still, you know, make it out okay. I mean, the next album we made was our self-titled album, which is one of our most successful albums, and it's, you know, one of the fan favorites. And so I'm just super stoked that we were able to, you know, push through all that, and come out of it, I feel like, on in a much better place. And I feel like that's kind of where we've been ever since then. You know, we've kind of had the same mindset of like, let's just make the music that we want to make and that makes us happy. And it's why it's kind of just like going back to why we started the band in the first place. You know, we love making music and going out and playing live for people, and just keep it as simple as that, you know.
Yeah, totally. And maybe you making that the self-titled was kind of like your reboot after that. It's like, this is who we really are. This is Mayday Parade.
Right, that was the idea for sure, yeah.
But that said, I know we're past time here, so I don't want to not mention the new EP, Out of Here. So that just dropped on Friday, right?
That's right, yeah.
And so, did you want to tell us a little bit about that before I let you go? I'm sorry for keeping you so much longer, but you're these stories are amazing. We're loving it.
Yeah, hey, it's all good. You know, I'm here just talking and talking. So yeah,
Nice.
I'm the reason. I'm sure it's, you know, gone on. But yeah, no. So we have the new EP, Out of Here. It's 3 songs. I'm so stoked about it. I really love each of these 3 songs a lot. We weren't planning on doing a 3-song EP. We just kind of, you know, so our last full length was Sunnyland, which we were really stoked about and really proud of. And we kind of just wanted to, I guess, maybe a year or so after that album had come out, we started looking at, you know, maybe instead of going in and recording the next album all at once, we would just kind of go in chunks at a time, record some songs. We recorded a Christmas song that came out last year, and just a handful of other new songs just to kind of have them. And then earlier this year in March, we went in to record 3 more songs. And we didn't really know what we were going to do with all this. It was just kind of, I guess the thought was we'll just kind of amass this, you know, catalog of music that we'll put out, you know, as a full length or whatever makes sense. And you know, as I said, it was early in March that we recorded the last batch of 3, and it was right when the pandemic stuff kind of broke open and started going nuts. And we you know, had shows that we were supposed to play that got canceled, and tours that got canceled and all this. And so everything just kind of got like flipped upside down, and all of our plans for this year had to be kind of, you know, canceled or pushed aside. And
Right. Right.
so we kind of re-looked at everything and went, you know, like, what can we do? And there's so much that we can't do, but we can put out music. We have these songs recorded. I would have loved to have put out a full length already, but we just didn't have enough songs. We weren't there yet. And so we kind of settled on, well, we felt like we needed to put something out.
Right.
These 3 songs seemed to work really nicely together. It was a little bit of, you know, kind of a nice rounded, for just it being 3 songs, kind of rounded out. So we decided to do that. We kind of hung on to a couple more that we're sort of saving for the full length, and we're going to try and get back in the next couple months, and hopefully finish up the next full length. But yeah, kind of in the meantime, this is something that we wanted to do. And again, yeah, I really love these songs. The response has been really cool so far. I wish we could play them live. We're doing a virtual show thing coming up. We'll be doing a couple more of those, and so that's just kind of like obviously that's not gonna, you know, replace the real thing, but it's just kind of doing what we can for now.
Sure.
And yeah, I'm stoked to still be doing it after it's been 15 years, almost to the day. It was October of 2005 that we started this band, so it's been just about, I forget what day it was, but pretty much exactly 15 years on the dot.
Wow. Okay. No, I mean, thanks for dropping them on us. During this somewhat of a drought. Artists are releasing music, and that's what's great about artists. I feel like you said, you just feel like you have to get it out. It's a can't pandemic or not, you're gonna release some new music. But so thanks for dropping them. I'm sure there are many people who appreciate it. So I did want to ask you before we let you go. We like to end the show just by saying, if you had one piece of advice you could give to aspiring artists, and you've dropped a bunch of gems on us already, but one piece of advice for aspiring artists, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say, but I think kind of the overall mindset of, like, I said, with other bands telling us, like, if this is what you want to do, it's kind of like I, said about meeting Brooks, about how, like, this wouldn't have happened if I hadn't met Brooks, because I would have spent forever going, I want to be in a band, but, like, just I never would have figured it out, and the only way to figure it out is to just to go do it and just to start. And it takes, steps. You're not going to get from here to there without, so many steps in between. And so it's just being active and trying to, and obviously things have changed a whole lot, in the 15 years since we started Mayday Parade, but still just trying to use whatever tools you can. Obviously the internet is so much of how you, get your name out there and music out there these days, but just doing anything you can to take it seriously, play, practice every day, just get the experience, and you'll just kind of figure it out as you go, I suppose. And do it your way. Like I mentioned, at the end of the day, you have to be happy with what you're doing. And if you're making music, you're the one who has to do it every day. So make sure that you just have fun with it, and make sure you enjoy it, and work hard. Bringing it backward.